Developing today. Royal sources admit that King Charles is dying, but insist that he will not abdicate, and that the monarch intends to follow the lead of his late mother and serve until the last moment of his life. That said, there is a growing acknowledgement that amid the king's cancer battle, amid his worsening health, which has been very apparent as we've seen him this week, power is slowly moving to the heir, as Prince William has, in some ways, now more influence over the future shape of the British royal family, and that absolutely relates to the role, specifically, of Prince Andrew, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle. Now, Lee Cohen is a foreign policy expert and a royal commentator for The Spectator, The Daily Telegraph, and Fox News. When Ben on Wire reported this week that there are rumours circulating that King Charles's health is much worse than what we've been led to believe, and the question was posed, should the king pass the reins to Prince William sooner rather than later, he wrote, British monarchs, unless they are pathetic like the Duke of Windsor, don't quit. It's very un-British. Unless incapacitated, he must carry on to the end. And Lee Cohen joins me now. Now, Lee, the British mainstream media are not going there in terms of Charles's health. That is a decision they have made. I believe that it is historically important, and given his constitutional role and given the life and death of kings and queens is part of the Shakespearean tale of the monarchy, that it is important to talk about, albeit I obviously am not revealing the specific details of what type of cancer Charles has and the type of treatment he's going through. But I think from a historical context, what we have to look at, Lee, is that the power is very, very quickly shifting to Prince William. However, I am told categorically that Charles has no intention of abdicating, that he absolutely believes that what his mother did was right, and that was serve until the very end. I mean, remember, just 2 days before her death, she was there to greet the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Is that your understanding, Lee? And is it the right decision? Or are you in the camp of this growing group of modernizers who say that the best thing for the British royal family would be for Charles to formally hand the throne to his eldest son?
No, Dan, I'm not in that camp. I'm in the same camp as you. It's very important that the king, it's so cruel because this has been a very short reign, and it followed on a reign that was really hard to step into. Queen Elizabeth, the beloved late monarch, who had a 70-year reign that really marked an era. But historically, British monarchs don't abdicate. Edward VII died in, I don't want to say in office, but, during his reign. George V died during his reign. George VI, all of those after protracted illnesses, not sort of slow motion illnesses that people were able to witness a decline of health. And that's what's very distressing with King Charles, is that, with social media, we see day to day how he looks. People pronounce that he's looking awful. And that tears at my heart, Dan. It really does. Because I see a man who's very dedicated to his role, which his reign, as we just said, is going to be one of the shortest ever. And it absolutely guts me. But I believe that the king took a solemn oath the same way that his mother did, and that he's inspired to serve. And she said on her 25th birthday, her whole reign, whether it be long or short. And, happily her reign was long, and sadly it looks that his reign will be short.
Yeah, very much. And it is indeed very sad. But I agree with Tom Sykes of The Royalist, who really says that the British mainstream media, by pretending that this isn't happening, are letting down their readers and their viewers. I think it's very important to note when you speak about the former monarchs, Lee, it was such a different world, wasn't it? It was a world before social media, and it was a world where these types of stories would quite literally be covered up. I mean, there were situations where the American newspapers would be reporting the fact that the king had cancer and the British media simply would not. The problem is we can see things with our own eyes now. And remember, it was Charles who went down this road of transparency by first revealing that he was going in for this prostate treatment. That was something that we never really saw from Prince Philip and the late Queen Elizabeth II, who both had had very long-running cancer battles in the final years of their life, but never went public, even with the most broad detail. I mean, we literally never heard the C word used in relation to either the former Duke of Edinburgh or the late Queen Elizabeth II, even though they were both battling cancer, in Prince Philip's case, by the way, for years before he died. So I do think we have to acknowledge the reality of the new world that we're in. And just to give you a little bit of insight about what is actually going on, here is Lady Colin Campbell on Outspoken and Tom Sykes of The Royalist Watch.
The king is not in any position, health-wise, to add to any stress and burdens that he already has. I mean, his cancer is not curable, or is certainly, let me rephrase that, for public consumption. It is not yet cured, and there is no great prognosis that it will ever be cured. So he is having to live with treatment.
It's a very powerful indication of the chaos which the King's office is in. Partly, as I have repeatedly said, and as you won't read in any of the UK newspapers, this is all about the fact that King Charles is seriously ill and is not expected to live very long. And you can tell that by looking at the photographs, by looking at his schedule, like how quickly and briefly he attends many events, by the fact that he has to go for these very long rest periods. He's in Balmoral at the moment, these very long rest periods before doing any major event. Like he has to go to the Vatican on Wednesday, and he's going to be the first leader of the Church of England to pray with the head of the Catholic Church. So it's very obvious to anybody watching that the king is really ill. And as I've also said repeatedly, I think he's been amazing. I think he's been incredibly courageous, incredibly brave, all the wonderful adjectives of praise that you could throw at Andrew, the example. And I think it's, anyone who we've all had friends or family who've struggled with cancer, and we know, how inspiring it is when people are amazing about it. But I also fundamentally, it was a massive mistake to announce that he had cancer. It's completely weakened him. The Queen did not even tell her own family that she was dying, and she had bone cancer at the end of her life, the last couple of years of her life, which is very, very painful. I was told she couldn't see very much. She certainly couldn't move around. She spent a lot of her time in bed. But she clung to the fiction that she was immortal because she knew how important it was. She knew how destabilizing it would be if she effectively did what Charles has done and pre-announced her own death, because it fires the gun. It fires the gun on the succession. And that is what this is all about. Make no mistake.
There's also been new reporting this week from Rob Shooter on this. He writes, "The walls of Buckingham Palace are whispering with concern, not scandal, as King Charles III faces the greatest battle of his reign, a serious, closely guarded illness that has left even his fiercest critics full of admiration for his courage. Royal insiders tell Shooter Scoop the 76-year-old monarch is seriously unwell, but determined to carry on, refusing to relinquish his duties despite growing fatigue. He's exhausted, but he won't stop, says one longtime aide. Every morning he insists on reading his red boxes. He believes his service to the country is his calling, and he'll keep going as long as he can. Behind the scenes, Prince William has quietly taken on more responsibility. Even the decision to strip Prince Andrew of his Duke of York title was a joint act of resolve, father and son united to protect the institution. So, Lee, there's a lot to digest there. But I think one thing that almost everyone is in agreement on is that Charles's reign has been derailed in the most appalling fashion through no choice of his own and through no fault of his own. And he is doing his best to deal with it.
No, I agree with that, Dan. This absolutely, as I said before, it tears at my heart. And it tears at my heart every time I say something publicly on the social media or wherever, and people just say, "Oh, you know, he's been a terrible king." Someone even said on something that I wrote that he's been terribly un-British, and that shakes me to my core. I think this man has done what he's thought is best. He's been guided by his duty. He was taught by the best, the Duke of Edinburgh and the late Queen. And I think, you know, against great pain, who has the stamina at 78 and, you know, beleaguered with cancer to even go through the motions, the red boxes, not just the red boxes, because you could do those from your bed, certainly, but to go on these state visits like he's on as we speak in the Vatican. And it really requires a lot. And if one is feeling that poorly and it's signaling, you know, kind of terminal illness and there's a terminal date, really, who has the courage to do that? This man has amazing courage and fortitude, and he is terribly British, whether you agree with him or not on climate change, on religion, on a lot of things. I think he's been a terrific king, and I think he's been a great legacy for the great Queen Elizabeth and Duke of Edinburgh.
And Lee, in this week's Spectator, you have said that King Charles can restore the monarchy. This is such a brilliant column. I just want to go through some of the highlights and then I'll get you to elaborate. So you write, Britain once stood as the world's unyielding shield, forged in Magna Carta's fire, tempered by Elizabeth I's resolve, and steeled by Churchill's defiance. From across the Atlantic, where we enlightened Americans still trace our liberty to your common law and political traditions, we watch with unease as the royal family, once a byword for dignity and duty, slides towards unreality. These days, royal rogues have cast a reputational shadow so that Britain resembles less the land of hope and glory and more the land of Oz. The misdeeds of the Yorks and Sussexes are not merely distractions. They are symptoms of institutional confusion, an inability to distinguish between public service and personal indulgence, between symbolism and spectacle. But amid this decline, there are encouraging signs of resolve. The King and Prince of Wales have begun carefully but firming to reassert standards. And in doing so, they have shown they understand an essential truth of monarchy. It survives only so long as the public trusts and respects it. Yet if the Yorks represent scandal, the Sussexes represent something just as corrosive: envy and vendetta. Since their 2020 departure from royal duties, Harry and Meghan have attempted to remain royalty in name, but not in function. They left the institution, but not its privileges. They have used their Duke and Duchess of Sussex title to promote memoirs, podcasts, Netflix deals, and charitable ventures, all while criticising the very system that gave those titles meanings. They are saboteurs. The late Queen made it clear that being half in, half out was not an option. She rightly understood that monarchy is not a marketing strategy, it is a compact with the people. To retain a title while disavowing the responsibilities it implies is insulting. The Sussexes' narrative that they were victims of palace cruelty, racial insensitivity, and media hostility has been rehearsed across American talk shows and documentary specials, and yet they cling to the very labels they claim have brought them pain. This is not a new model of monarchy. It is a kind of constitutional cosplay that cheapens Britain's most enduring institution. Lee adds, the King and Prince William have been measured in their response. They have avoided public recrimination, opting instead for firmness through silence. But silence is not sustainable forever. It seems they sense that the public patience is wearing thin. The monarchy's strength lies in the fact that it stands above partisanship, above fashion, and above self-interest. When that symbolism is appropriated for personal enrichment or wielded in defiance of the Crown's own values, the damage is unbearable. The public understand this. The monarchy depends on respect that cannot coexist with double standards. It cannot survive the perception that one tier of royalty is held accountable while another is free to monetize its connection to the throne. Restraint is dignified only if matched by resolution. The answer is not revenge, it is restoration. The monarchy has always evolved to preserve its core, and now it must do so again. Parliament should act, if necessary, to finalise the withdrawal of Andrew's title and remove the Sussex titles altogether. This is not pettiness, it is existential. Titles like trust must be earned and safeguarded. As an outsider, let me share that Britain has long been admired, not for its pageantry alone, but for the seriousness behind it. Today, that seriousness is at risk. The world processes the spectacle, but it also watches how Britain responds. The land of hope and glory cannot afford to become the land of Oz. The monarchy cannot survive as both theatre and anchor. It must choose, and there is hope that it is beginning to choose wisely. So Lee, an absolutely brilliant column, and I think very tough, but very fair. And my impression of that column is that you are saying, King Charles, there's no time to wait. Like, we can't wait for King William V. By that point, it might be too late. Because who knows where the darkness of the Andrew story is going to go, but who knows where the circus, I like the Oz-like circus, of Meghan and Harry, and who knows, maybe an Archie and Lily, when Meghan gives them their own Instagram accounts, which is inevitable, and also Fergie, who's going to be back looking for money too, not to mention Beatrice and Eugenie as well, who don't come out of all of this smelling of roses either.
Well, Dan, people say to me all the time in the United States and in Britain, why am I so taken with the monarchy? And really I am, because the monarchy, what the monarchy represents and the function it has, goes to my core as a conservative man. And what that means to me is that we take care of our traditions, and we take care of what makes us culturally British and American and all of those things. And the monarchy represent that in a way that we don't have in the United States. In the United States, we can buy almost anything we want, but we cannot buy, a family descended whose descendants go back thousands of years, and it's real. Even if we were to one day make our president into a king, he wouldn't have that underpinning. He or she wouldn't have that underpinning them. So it has such great significance. And, most people, I see all these, so-called royal experts on Twitter and in social media who, really, they're just interested in the pageantry without the seriousness. And I'm interested in the pageantry of two, but I know that the pageantry only exists if the seriousness exists. And all of these things, Meghan Markle and Harry, are a threat to that seriousness, and they don't care a jot for it. And shame on Harry, who's a disgrace, who comes from a legacy that is noble, but I don't mean just noble in the nobility sense of nobility. I mean noble in the true sense of the word, almost holy. And for him to allow these pot shots and allow that actress that he married to degrade it. No question, other members of the royal family, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, have degraded that as well, but they haven't set out to do it deliberate harm. And so I feel that's another order of magnitude. And I feel that the vendetta and the envy that I mentioned with regard to the Sussexes really does set it apart. It is, I said it's as corrosive as the scandal of the Yorks, but you know what? Upon reflection, and when you read it so brilliantly like a Shakespearean actor, Dan, I was thinking it's even more corrosive, the vendetta and the envy.
Yeah.
Wow.
100%, 100%. They are more of a threat, and people don't like to hear that, but they are. However, what about the Fergie question? Okay, because there's new reporting that she is actually trying to distance herself now from Prince Andrew. Rob Shooter writing that she would leave Prince Andrew if she could afford it. Listen to this new reporting. Lee. Behind Palace Gate, Sarah Ferguson is raging. Insiders whispered that her loyalty to Prince Andrew may be more financial than romantic. Multiple royal sources tell Shooter Scoop that the former Duchess of York is livid after losing her Royal Highness title amid Andrew's latest Epstein fallout. She's furious. That title was her identity. Obviously, it was the Duchess of York title. Losing it feels like a death. But the real shock is Sarah would leave if she could afford to. She's stuck. Royal Lodge belongs to Andrew, not her. Without him, she'd have no home or lifestyle. And another insider added, publicly, this is a confidant of her, publicly she's standing by Andrew, privately she's furious and plotting her escape. So does this make Sarah Ferguson now more of a danger to the monarchy too, if she's going to be on the grift game like Harry and Meghan as well?
Well, I think in some regard she's been on the grift game for a much longer time. Yeah, for decades. And while I really want to like Fergie, I mean, I'm sure she's a very likable person. My admiration for the monarchy doesn't allow me to, because I know what particularly the former Duke of Edinburgh, the late Duke of Edinburgh, I should say, the late Prince Philip, warned about her, as he warned about Meghan Markle. He was nobody's fool like his daughter, Princess Anne. But having said that, it's hard to take anything that Fergie says with any seriousness or any of her actions, because she then goes back and undoes them. Like she publicly denounced Epstein, and then in private she was writing him notes saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did this. I had to do it." And I mean, her character is just so poorly that it's impossible to admire her.
And what about the daughters? What about Beatrice and Eugenie? Because for a long time, Lee Cohen, there has been this consensus, not necessarily one that I agreed with, that, oh, actually, the poor daughters, this is horrible. And of course, there is some truth in that. However, increasingly now, royal insiders saying actually they enabled some of this behavior. They never pulled their parents up, that they're adults now. And of course they love their mother and father. Of course they do. But not all of their actions have been completely above board. There's been this financial dealing with a Middle Eastern bank, for example, lobbying for security, lobbying for royal roles, which is something that William is not going to countenance. Which camp are you in, Lee? Do you feel sorry for the princesses, Beatrice and Eugenie, or do you think actually they have to take some of the blame for this situation too?
Well, then, what I'll say is this: I have a foot and a half in one camp and perhaps a toe in another camp. And look, we can't choose who our parents are. And, their parents were not, they were the worst examples of character that I can imagine. But having said that, there haven't been too many terrible slip-ups vis-a-vis the York girls. I've always felt that Eugenie was perhaps a little too partial and flirtatious with Harry and Meghan, but that's sort of a personal aside. But the real question, I think, Dan, is can we ever look at them again, no matter what, even if, there were no misdeeds on their parts? How can they come out of this unscathed as, public figures in the line of succession, very much still a part of the royal family? They're there. We can't undo them, and they shouldn't be undone. It's not their fault they were born to Sarah and Andrew, and so I don't know, but I still have a toe. Well, no, I have, as I said, a toe in one camp and a foot in the other.
Indeed. Goodness gracious me. Okay, well, not as if there's been no shortage of royal news to discuss. Lee Cohen, so appreciate your transatlantic perspective as ever. And of course, make sure you follow Lee Cohen on X for all the brilliant royal analysis. And of course, you can find his columns in The Spectator, Fox News, and The Telegraph as well. Lee Cohen, thank you so much. So great to have you. And of course, if you do want to sign up to our Royal Uncancelled After Show here on Outspoken,
Prince Andrew's royal standing continues to crumble after he was stripped of his Duke of York title in disgrace last week following renewed scrutiny of his connections to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. As the scandal deepens, royal observers warn that the ongoing controversy surrounding the disgraced prince risks overshadowing the important work of the reigning monarch. Royal commentator Arthur Edwards noted that while the king has been making strides in his duties, most notably through his recent visit to the Vatican to meet the Pope, the public's focus remains fixed on Andrew's downfall. The king's visit, intended as a symbolic step towards strengthening interfaith dialogue, was instead dominated by headlines about Andrew's future at Royal Lodge, the 30-bedroom estate, where he continues to live under a long-term lease. Despite pressure from Buckingham Palace, discussions are ongoing about whether he should vacate the property. Reports suggest Andrew still holds a 50-year lease on the mansion, meaning he would be entitled to compensation if forced to leave. However, sources say the prince is reluctant to relocate to Norfolk or Scotland, preferring to remain near London or Windsor, close to his daughters. Any move to Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle could provoke criticism that he is being rewarded rather than held accountable. Observers believe Andrew will now only appear at limited family gatherings, such as Christmas events, out of respect for family unity rather than public representation. There is also uncertainty over the future of his former title. Some have speculated that the Duke of York title could eventually pass to Prince Louis, the youngest son of Prince William and Princess Catherine, though many experts believe the title's reputation is too tarnished to be revived. The scandal has created a difficult balancing act for the king, who is attempting to modernise the monarchy's image while managing the fallout from his brother's disgrace. For many royal watchers, the hope is that attention will soon shift from scandal to the monarch's efforts to promote unity and goodwill across the world.